A heart attack in rural Canada leads to a story of fear, adventure, and intrigue in pre-World War II France and Germany. My name is Steve Glines. My novel, Poplar Hill, is based on stories my mother used to tell when I was a child. Storytelling and writing are a family tradition. My family was an eccentric lot. Everyone loved to tell stories. My father was 30 years older than my mother, but she could tell the story as well as he could, and they often competed. My father would start with, "The last time I met Mao Zedong." My mother would counter with, "Well, when I met Hitler." My father died when I was 11, and a few years later, my mother, Grandma Kitty to my kids, moved to Poplar Hill, Nova Scotia, Canada. Poplar Hill was a hardscrabble neighborhood of fishermen, farmers, and laborers, many of whom have been on the land for generations. It's a hard life, but an honest one, and Kitty loved it. She bought the property marked Hugh Ross on the section maps, and she became a master chef when she was 62. She lived there for the rest of her life, dying just short of her 80th birthday in 1999. The heart attack that ultimately killed her began during the ice storm that hit Nova Scotia on Friday, January 9th, 1998. All of eastern Canada was paralyzed. It was called the storm of the century. The massive towers that brought power from Labrador were brought down by the weight of the accumulating ice. The farmers in Quebec estimated that 80% of the maple trees in the province had been destroyed. Nothing could move in Nova Scotia. Kitty was trapped in her house until a county-wide effort to rescue her was finally mounted 3 days later on Monday. She spent the next 16 months in various hospitals, nursing homes, and eventually hospice. Poplar Hill, the novel, traces her progress from that heart attack through to her death. But this is the story more about her life than her death. This is a story about Kitty, her best friend Barb, and the rich assortment of characters that live in Poplar Hill, and about the events that molded Kitty's character before and during the Great Depression and the years spent in Nazi Germany just before the war. This is a story about who Kitty was and how she became the crazy aunt we all came to love. Kitty Stevenson was born in New York City on June 10, 1919. She lived in a mansion down the street from Teddy Roosevelt on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. She was cared for by a Scottish nanny named Bessie McDermott and a host of maids, butlers, footmen, and cooks. She was born wealthy. In the summer of 1925, Archie Stevenson, her father, packed up the family for a grand tour of Europe. That was something rich Americans did in those days. When the tour was over, Kitty was deposited at an austere convent school in Grenoble, France. French was the only language allowed. Archie went home to attend to business. The children of the wealthy in New York City were not to be seen, heard, or even be on the same continent as their parents. Kitty would not see her parents again until Thanksgiving Day, 1933. It was a bittersweet homecoming. The family fortune had mostly been wiped out by the Great Depression. The New York City and Bar Harbor houses had been sold, and all of the servants dismissed, with the exception of Bessie McDermott, who had no other place to go. When Kitty returned home, she found her mother in the kitchen cooking for the first time in her life. The turkey, while overcooked, was delicious. During the Depression, Kitty learned to cook while her mother made wine from dandelions and a meager crop of grapes. Her father built a still in the basement to make brandy. Heat for the house was a byproduct of this process, not the other way around. In 1937, Kitty graduated from New Canaan Public High School. Kitty loved opera, so she went to Munich, Germany to study opera and to spend what was left of the family fortune. That had been locked away in German banks and blocked by the orders of Hitler. In today's terms, it would have been several $million. In 1937, Munich, Germany had a world-famous opera school, a famous university, and it was home to both Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. For the next 2 years, Kitty often saw Hitler in the Café Heck. In the fall of 1937, a dozen young Americans and British expatriates rode their bicycles past the Dachau concentration camp while Kitty photographed it. She never learned how the photo was smuggled out of Germany, but it appeared in the Chicago Tribune. In 1938, a crisis over Czechoslovakia threw Europe into a turmoil. Czechoslovakia had been created in 1919 out of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it contained about 3 million Germans. It was a hotbed of ethnic clashes. Hitler said that all he wanted to do was reunite the German-speaking people. That meant dismembering the Czech Republic. The crisis ebbed and flowed all year long. As the political situation grew tense, Kitty's way out was always through Trieste, an Italian port on the Adriatic Sea. From there, she could reach Athens. After the first Czech crisis calmed down, she went back to Munich in time for the great conference that guaranteed peace for our time. Kitty ran up to Chamberlain and shook his hand. That was the end of September 1938. it was not the end of the Czech crisis. After the first Czech crisis ended, Hitler absorbed part of Czechoslovakia, and the world breathed a sigh of relief. It was a time for the Nazis to look inward again, and this time they took their wrath out on the Jews. On the 9th of November, 1938, Hitler ordered that all Jewish synagogues be destroyed. He also ordered that the windows of every Jewish shop broken and the eldest male member of every Jewish family arrested. That night came to be known as Kristallnacht, or the Night of the Broken Glass. The next morning, Kitty toured the city. She wrote a dispatch for the Associated Press. Her friends wrote their own dispatches for the United Press International and Reuters. When word of the atrocities got out, the United States broke diplomatic relations with Germany. As the Czech crisis got deeper and deeper, Kitty would leave Germany at a moment's notice and head by train to Trieste, Italy, where she could drive or take a steamer to Athens. The Czech crisis reached its peak on the Ides of March, March 15, 1939, when Hitler declared that the Czech Republic no longer existed. Kitty was sure there would be a war, so she left as fast as she could and made it as far as Trieste. But the only way out was on a Jewish refugee boat, the SS Dachau. Her passage was third-class steerage. Over 900 people were confined to the hold of the ship for the 4-day voyage. She said it was disgusting. Kitty got off the SS Dachau in Istanbul, as did any Jewish refugees with money. Those making the overland trip to Israel were not counted in the immigration limits imposed by the British. The ship went on to Haifa. It made only one such trip. This is a video of that trip arriving in Haifa. After the final Czech crisis, Kitty decided it was time to leave and booked her passage back to New York. She was running out of money, so a German-flagged ship was, by this time, her only way out of Germany. The SS Bremen set sail for New York City on August 22, 1939. On August 26, just 2 days from New York, Hitler ordered the SS Bremen to return home. The captain refused, and Kitty made it home on August 20, 1939. The Second World War began on September 1st. During the war, Kitty worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. She lived in an apartment that had been rented by her mother as an address in the city when the New York City mansion had to be sold. When the war was over, Kitty helped Jewish refugees learn to speak English in her kitchen. I remember that. I was there. I also remembered the tattooed numbers on their arms. Kitty had told her story, well, most of it anyway. By the spring of 1999, her kidneys had failed. She needed dialysis to live. Since nothing would improve the quality of her life, Kitty made the decision to end all medical treatment.